Today, I wanted to discuss a little bit more about the issue of IDs and certifying service dogs or assistance dogs, depending on where you're from. And I know that this topic is very controversial and that a lot of people are against it, but I do think that it's important to look at it as a debate. By any means, I don't mean to discriminate or anything like that. I just want to learn about it and just educate the way I can. I learned a great deal researching this, actually, because I research laws not only in the US, I research issues in countries like in the UK, in countries like where my mother's from, Belgium, and even in France, where it's vastly different environments. But essentially, the issue of certifying assistance dogs. I'll call them assistance dogs for now, but for my US viewers, assistance dogs in other countries like Belgium, the UK, and France, assistance dogs mean service dog. It doesn't include emotional support animal, and that's about that. So every time you hear assistance dogs, just know that I'm talking about service dogs. So, yes, why is it important to look at both sides? I do think that although I'm not for it. I'd like to just settle that down. So my point of view is probably biased. Also, take what I say with a grain of salt. Do your own research about the topic. Please do your own research. Like, I'm not inciting you to take my word for it. Research it. Research the topic if you're passionate about it or if you're just curious about it, because I feel like it's been a topic that's been popping up online a lot more these days. Especially a lot of dog trainers like Victoria Stilwell, they've been posting about it, how it's a rising issue, and every time people bring up, but what about other countries that have IDs? How, like, certifications will solve this issue. And before, I used to be for that because my views of service dogs was not limited to the US, it was also like in Belgium, and for me it was kind of weird that we didn't have certifications or something. But then it kind of shifted with not only research but reading from other, you know, other service dog handlers who I probably will like put down below this video, so check it out. I'll also put all my sources if you're just you want to do your own research, like if you want to check out the sources I used, um, anything like that. But also put the Instagram accounts of some service dog handlers who have done highlights on their Instagram stories about various issues that, you know, service dog handlers face and how IDs are actually discriminatory and not helpful. This is how you know that I was prepared for this. I wrote everything on my phone, and my computer is currently being used for the mic and for the light, so I couldn't use it because I can't make it face me. So you'll have to bear with my iPhone. So let's go. So, some of the pros about, certifying service dogs or assistance dogs. Yet, please, I know it's hard, but I'm just asking you to listen to me. So, some of the pros. So, again, disclaimer, I don't necessarily believe them. It could, I said could, create a barrier for fakes. It will make it harder. Have a government certification, fakes will be less likely to happen. People are more likely to depend on just going to an institution to evaluate their dogs, to see if the dog is ready for public access and for different environments. That may be hospitals or restaurants or movie theaters and whatnot. It's easy for people to judge based on like a dog having a bad day, but if we have certifications, then it would release that kind of feeling, and will also stop what's called in the community fake spotting. I believe a little bit. I think if we had actual like government institutions like certifying dogs, it could. Again, no, I shouldn't say it would. It could, because we don't know how these things would work. It's in theory, it could reduce that. be less likely to judge teams on a bad day, which happens a lot lately. A lot of people on YouTube have been releasing videos of fake service dogs that, to me personally, they don't really look fake. It just looks like a dog just like sniffing something, for example, and that happens on a bad day. Next point. Could potentially reduce questions that people have towards handlers. So in the US, especially, you have 2 questions for service dog handlers that you're allowed to ask as a business owner. You're allowed to ask if this is a task-trained service dog. And second question is, what task is this dog trained to do? Although those are the 2 questions, some people are not always trained about them, and people have pointed out that just making an ID could reduce those questions, as people don't have to answer anything, especially people who are nonverbal for whatever reason. Some people have selective mutism. Some people don't speak the same language because their first language is not actually English. It might be American or British Sign Language or any form of just nonverbal communication. Something to take into consideration. It could help the government keep track of assistance animals and regulate them more. There is definitely an issue with some programs not training dogs as thoroughly as they should. If you have certifications, governmental certifications, then you're more likely, I said more likely, to not run into this issue. First video, first technical difficulty, yay! My mic is not staying on its I was totally ready for this. Potential. Benny. It ensures that the dog has some level of drive for the work and is ready for public access. An issue sometimes that has also been kind of a debate on Instagram. I feel like the service dog community on Instagram has been on fire lately. I don't know what has been happening. But essentially what I think it could do, it could help to test out if a dog is willing to work, which is a big ethical question that we have in the community too. I don't necessarily think that a dog's drive can be evaluated through social media, to be honest, but it would ensure that someone else evaluates your dog for you, especially, again, if it's a program dog, making sure that those program dogs really want to work. And a lot of programs, for disclaimer, I'm talking about shady things because I've seen that pop up on the news, but a lot of programs are legitimate. I'm not trying to shame or shade programs by any means. I really think that most programs are amazing, but unfortunately, with this day and age, there is always going to be scams with everything, and unfortunately, this fell into people with disabilities. So yes, I apologize if it may come out that way. I apologize a lot in this video. But yeah, that's not what I mean by that. Sets a minimum standard for assistance dogs. The International Assistance Dog Association, that took me a while, but essentially they have a standard for what assistance dogs should be like, and some people have been criticizing it, saying that it's a little low, and it's also very standard. It doesn't really involve anything with different environments, like in different countries or different temperatures, anything like that. And it may seem weird, but I feel like we don't talk about this, but so many things can affect a dog's behavior. Minimum standard. Again, it's just something to think about. I just realized this far into the video I've been using assistance dogs and service dog interchangeably. Interchangeably. What is going on? So those were kind of the pros that I read about, that I kind of thought about, and things like that. Now, let's explore what everyone was waiting for. The cons. Still involves someone evaluating your disability. Yes, and that is extremely important, especially with the issue rising in the UK, with the rising complaints to people applying for disability aid and being refused. It's extremely diminishing to have to see this happening and to have to see people being refused aid when they really need it, but because someone else evaluated them as not being disabled, and not even someone that's a medical professional that's evaluating someone else's disability. It's extremely diminishing what's happening in the UK, and I'm scared that if something happens where you have this generalized system where, owner trainers have to certify their assistance dogs, what would happen is, first of all, before they could get certified, that person would have to be approved as having a disability. And that may seem as crazy to you, but there are so many disabilities, so many chronic illnesses. Like, most of you, probably a lot of you who are not in the Spoonie community, when I mention fibromyalgia and Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, you probably don't know what those are, and those are still pretty common. I mean, I'm not talking about ME or something like that. And I feel like it's something that we don't talk enough about, is about how many people, especially people with invisible disabilities, may cope with this. It's just having someone else assess them would be it would be taking a gamble, and I don't believe that they will be held to standards. I don't believe that people will do what's best because, again, what's happening in the UK, and I'm scared that if something like this was to happen in a country like in the US, it could bring up a lot of issues. And this is not just an issue that I have. Before talking about this topic, I asked about it on my service dogs Instagram account. I asked about it on a Facebook group, and I was just like, "Hey, what do you guys think?" And there were some people from the UK that were like, "Hey, like this is happening in the UK, so I don't trust the UK government to evaluate dogs." And for assistance dogs in the UK, it's also kind of alarming because Assistance Dog UK has been trying to advocate for having some kind of certification for assistance dogs for years. Okay, the law is different. You can't, like, from what I read from the Discrimination Act, there's no two questions. It's only when the dog misbehaves that the owner is held accountable. Other medical devices don't need to go through that level of inspections, and other medical devices don't need to show ID, and they don't need to show certifications to business owners or whatever. It's like, if wheelchairs don't have to go through this, why should assistance dogs? Like, it doesn't make sense technically, because I don't have to show ID if I use my cane, but I do have to use an ID if I have an assistance dog. You see, like, it may seem weird to you because it's like, yeah, but the dog needs training, but it's like the dog is a medical device, and it's strongly needed by its handler. A handler does not just want the dog to be there. A real handler physically needs that dog, maybe for psychiatric or physical or whatever reason. Like, an assistant animal. I've been talking about dogs, but this is about assistant animals. I apologize, guys. Like, this is about assistant animals, and having to show an ID for them is ridiculous because it's like, show me an ID to prove that you're disabled. And it may not seem that way to you, but it is. Like, I don't question someone using a wheelchair, and I don't ask them for an ID, and it's rude to me. And it's the same thing, like, the ADA, which is the Americans with Disabilities Act, which is the law that we have here in the US, also approves mini horses. That's why I should say assistance animals, and I apologize again. I've been talking mostly about dogs because dogs have been the main issue. My brain, work with me. But it's a strong issue. We can't just ignore it. We just can't ignore the fact that it is discriminating. It is diminishing in a way to ask someone for ID for a medical device. And a lot of people feel that way, and a lot of people have expressed feeling that way. There's even been petitions all over like the UK, and I'll link them below, about how people don't want Assistance Dog UK to discriminate against owner trainers and things like that. And IDs would be just another way to add on to that. And I mentioned the UK a lot, but in a country like Belgium, where they also have IDs, no business owners train their staff to identify a real ID from a fake ID. And that is an enormous issue. So you have those IDs that are there for no reason, so fakes could continue. That's A. B, we're not cracking down on those sites that sell IDs. And on that same note of holding business owners accountable, IDs do not increase accessibility. It does not. In Belgium and in France, and I'll link again below articles of what happened. They're in French, but I believe you can translate them. If you need translation, let me know. I'll send it to you. But essentially, in Belgium, in Brussels, there's this big tourist avenue called Avenue Louise, and on it there was this Haagen Dazs bar, and this woman with her wheelchair and her assistance dog tried to come in, and they were refused access. And it's her trying to advocate for herself, trying to show her dog certifications. They were trying to discriminate against her. And then when they knew that they couldn't discriminate against her dog, the employees tried to say that they refused her because there wasn't space for her wheelchair, which I'm like, how did you think that mere excuse was better? I'm getting very passionate about this. Do you train your staff, or do you train people and make people accountable for the fact that they need to know this? If the owner has the right to kick the animal out if they're misbehaving. However, if the owner does not know that law and the person pulls out their ID and they're like, yeah, but again, according to the law, to me, it would just create more confusion. It may seem weird, but yes, essentially it would just create more confusion in the story. And the person is like, yeah, but that dog has an ID, so can I kick it out? Even if it's barking, drooling on other people's food, lunging at kids, you know what I mean? No, the dog should be accountable for their behaviors. They should not be judged because they have a piece of paper. That's my opinion, and that's also just an issue I'm thinking about. It's just, yeah. Oh my god. How do you know that other people don't share IDs? You know, if someone else steals another person's ID, how do you know? How do you reapply for an ID? Difference with a picture of a lab with the actual Labrador Retriever sitting in front of you. And I'm using that breed because it's commonly used in assistance dog work. And it's like, how do I know that someone else is not using my ID if I lose it? You know what I mean? Like, I know in Belgium there's this system to check IDs. Has to know about it, so all these issues kind of come back to, where is the business owner's accountability in all of this? Yes, makes disabled people accountable for carrying an ID around. If I check an ID online, and then if I just say the number, in the case that I say my service dog's ID number, it's more likely that the business owner would not believe me and would say something like, I need to see actual ID. And it's again diminishing for the disabled individual. It's just like shifting responsibility onto them. You have to carry your dog's ID. You have to do this. And it's a question that I ask myself. Do we really need to hold people accountable that much? Or do we just need to train other people more about what assistance dogs are? And finally, my last point. Who pays for those darn certifications? Because even if it's covered by the government, which I highly doubt it would be because it's not the case here. If you want to get your dog approved by Assistance Dog International, it still costs a couple of $1,000s. It's also the time to getting your dog certifying. Will the test center be accessible necessarily? How would they manage people's cases? How would they manage the space? Because you can't just have everyone passing their test at once. Did we think about the resources needed for certifications? It's not just money, it's resources. Will the government be willing to invest money? The answer? No! I don't think so. A lot of disabled individuals are sick and they need, like, physically sick and they need treatment. I need treatment. I need physical therapy every 2 weeks. I have this opportunity to be born in a family that can afford it, thankfully, but not everyone has that. And it's a question we need to ask ourselves. How will we let people afford it? I'm sorry, this was messy and kind of all over the place. I'll talk to you next time, and let me know what you think.